Welcome to my talk, Access Denied, the Illusion of Inclusion. Brogan, can we get a graphic to pop up, please? What do you mean it's not in the budget? The Illusion of Inclusion. My name's Mikey. I'm a 3D artist and an accessibility consultant. I'm also legally blind, and I use a white cane to navigate. Milo sometimes tries to help, but he's pretty much the world's worst guide dog. Over the last 10 years, I've worked on everything from indie to AAA with teams all around the world. And guess what? All of it's been done fully remotely. We talk a lot about accessibility for the players with things like high contrast mode, subtitles, and controller remapping. And we absolutely should, especially considering that 80% of disabled players still face barriers that stop them from enjoying the game in the first place. And accessibility features are essentially just options. It's a little bit more to it than that, but they are options. And those options make the games more accessible for the players. But as developers, as employees, where are our options? Where's our accessibility? I'm talking about this because it's 2026 and it feels like the industry has taken 10 steps back. I'm not a bricklayer. I work on a computer with an internet connection, making video games. I shouldn't have to sit in traffic and navigate unreliable public transport just to sit in a virtual meeting and be told it's for team cohesion. We've given the players options to make the games accessible and playable for their needs. What about the needs of the developers and the people making the games? And this isn't just about people with disabilities. It affects parents, carers, people with dependents. What I'm trying to say is flexibility helps everyone. We all deserve access and no one deserves to be excluded for something that they can't control. So I'm going to give you the short version of this. In 2017, I was about 6 months into my first role in the industry, and we moved to a brand new office that had no open windows. It was just pure air conditioning being pumped into the room. And that air conditioning caused serious infections in both eyes. And my doctors basically advised that I work from home. And when I asked for a reasonable adjustment, which was also advised by the doctors to be able to work from home, the answer I got was basically, if I let you work from home, I'll have to let everybody work from home. I was then brought into a meeting room with my wife and was fired. Not because I couldn't do the job, but because I wasn't allowed to work from home as a reasonable adjustment. And that same studio supports charities who support disabled gamers, but they wouldn't support their own disabled employee. They also told me that if I ever disclosed my disability to anyone or any other studio, that I wouldn't get hired in the industry. But this is something I've noticed in the games industry, and it's not just limited to the games industry. The companies who push their values and shout about their values are often the ones who struggle when those values are put to the test. In the UK, disabled people are 30% less likely to be hired. Those kind of gaps aren't created by accident. Like, that's built into the way that we hire and the way that we work. A lot of studios talk about company values like transparency, fairness, equality, diversity, equity, and inclusion. All great values, and some studios have actually even won awards for those values. The issue is when companies have policies, the policies get in the way of those values. Let's say a studio has a 1-hour commute policy for all employees. If your company policy says all employees have to live within a 1-hour commute of the office, but your values on the wall say that you're inclusive, then the policy wins, and that inclusion then becomes exclusion. Some people with disabilities can't drive, like myself. It's not a choice. I just can't legally drive, and you definitely wouldn't want to be on the roads with me if I was driving. But those company policies where it says you have to live within a 1-hour commute, if you can drive, it might take you 20 minutes. But for me, living the same distance away, might take me an hour and a half. So those policies are actually keeping disabled people out of work. About 18% of people in the games industry identify as disabled. That's 1 in 5 people in the games industry. That's 1 in 5 people who might need reasonable adjustments or might suffer because of those silly policies. And those are just the ones we know about. A lot of people tend not to actually disclose their disability. And those policies assume that you'll always be fit and healthy. I lost my vision and became disabled when I was 18. Life kicked me in the balls when I least expected it to. So it could happen to anybody. So at some point, someone who doesn't think they need those adjustments now might later in life need those adjustments. So this doesn't affect just me. This can affect anyone. And I think companies need to stop letting the policies override the values. If you truly are inclusive, then be inclusive. Allow people who need it to work remotely. We're not all the same and we can't be treated the same. I think companies need to stop it with the bullshit values and just be a little more human. The journey to work is often the first barrier that people with disabilities face. Companies shout about their values, but some companies shout about how accessible they are, with things like ramps, lifts, braille signage, accessible toilets. Those things matter, but they're usually the minimum legal requirement, and they make for great PR. So I did some research into a studio that not only promotes how amazing their values are, but the fact that the office space itself is accessible. So I looked a little deeper and found that the council actually owns the building that they're in. And it was the council who had put the accessibility features in there to begin with because of the building itself was a modern building, so that was the minimum legal requirement for them to have accessibility features. And if they did have them and maintain them, they could get extra funding. So before the studio even signed the lease, they already had accessibility features in the building. It just worked out for the studio that they could push it and it looked great for social media. It's just ultimately great PR for them. This is the issue. Focusing only on the building and only on the accessibility features inside the building misses much bigger questions like, can an employee with a disability actually safely get from their front door to the building and then back home again safely? Do you even hire people with disabilities, or are they just too difficult to accommodate for? And ultimately, do your policies disproportionately affect people with disabilities? Before a person with a disability even reaches the office door, they've probably already dealt with unreliable public transport. Say the bus doesn't turn up on time or drive straight past you. Last minute platform changes, or they couldn't get on with their wheelchair because the train or tram was too busy. And 60% of people with disabilities report barriers in transport. And then on top of all of that, there's the physical safety concerns. People with disabilities are twice as likely to be the victim of a violent crime. By the time an employee with a disability is turned up at the office, they're more than likely going to be exhausted, both mentally and physically. And let's say a car has mounted the curb or a train has been cancelled. Those things don't just make us late for work. They make work really difficult and make life really exhausting. The journey to the office for an employee with a disability is a topic that seems to get massively overlooked, especially in the conversation around inclusion and work-life balance. I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to bring that conversation back to the table and in front of people. We know that remote working works. The games industry accidentally ran the experiment during COVID. And guess what? The games industry didn't collapse. It thrived. We were able to expand our talent pools. Disabled employment increased. People could move away from expensive cities to more affordable areas. And people got to spend more time with family. If the work that we do is digital and on computers, then your location is nothing more than a policy choice. When you remove flexibility, you remove access. It's like taking away high contrast mode. And now all of a sudden, a lot of people can't play your game. And you're sat there wondering why the hell your playing numbers have dropped. Something else that gets overlooked is sensory control. You can have your own customizable space at home. You can have the lighting how you want it. You can have figures and wallpaper, however you want it to be. But that's your space, and that's where you do your best work. And that's a space that you can't have in an open plan office. Around 80% of people with disabilities wanted to keep the flexibility of remote working post-COVID. And now with this huge push towards return to office, it's keeping people with disabilities out of work. In the UK, the Equality Act exists to protect us, but actually enforcing those rights takes time, money, legal knowledge, and emotional resilience. And it's probably because of those things that less than 1% of discrimination cases go to tribunal. I've personally faced discrimination in the hiring process, in the workplace, and even on public transport during a commute when I was asked to prove my disability. I didn't know my rights then, so nothing came of those cases. But even for people who do know their rights, the process is still time consuming and it's absolutely exhausting. Here's a scary part. You won't ever find out about a lot of discrimination cases because companies choose to settle, and they do this so they can keep their reputation. You can join a union, but you have to know that they exist and you have to be able to afford it. And it's not always affordable, especially with stagnating wages and rising bills. We've reached a weird point where those of us who need support the most are the least able to access it. Even with simple support, like when we ask for a reasonable adjustment, for most studios that's a lot of hassle and a massive inconvenience. And even if you are able to take legal action, it's both a financial and mental strain. And not to mention, you might even get shadow banned from the industry. Some people are willing to put their careers and livelihoods on the line to stop injustices from happening to others in the future. Accessibility and inclusion doesn't just start and end with the final product, whether it be a game or a website. And it doesn't start and end with words on a wall that make for great PR and look good on social media. It starts with options and the understanding that we're not all the same. Now, I've been talking about the benefits of remote working for the last 10 years, and even I know that it's not for everyone. But for many of us, it's the only way that we can still have equal opportunities. For many of us, it's the only way that we can still be included, even if we can't get into the building. I still think hybrid working is hilarious. So what, you tell me that you're only inclusive for 2 days of the week? Come on, sort it out. But there are still good studios and good people out there. People who don't see me for my disability. They only see me for my ability and what I can bring to the table. And actually allow me to make great games and bring teams together. It's not complicated. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say is, disabled people and disabled developers do want to work. But until we remove the barriers, we'll continue to be excluded and kept out of work. And inclusion will just continue to be empty words. But it's not all doom and gloom. Here are 3 things you can do right now as a studio to be more inclusive and more accessible. Offer remote working and reasonable adjustments. Remove commute and location-based filters. And just be flexible. Ask questions. We're not made of glass. We've spent years making the games industry more accessible for the players. I think it's about time we started making it accessible for the developers too. Even Milo approves of this message. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble on for the last 15 to 20 minutes. I appreciate you. Bye.
A QR code appears on screen. I'd love to connect on LinkedIn.